Greetings to all. Welcome to the Salesforce CPQ video series. And in this video, we will be covering package settings. My name is Prashant Ambishan. I have over 17 years of professional experience, and most of it has been in the Salesforce area. I've played multiple roles, from being a consultant to a solution architect to managing delivery and execution of various Salesforce projects. In my current role, I'm the Salesforce.com practice lead at UST Global. Also, I hold multiple certifications in Salesforce, including Application Architect and CPQ Specialist. I've also been a Trailblazer mentor as part of giving back to the community. Apart from Salesforce, I'm very keenly interested in chess. I love solving and creating puzzles, and I also love a game of table tennis. My Twitter handle and LinkedIn details are also provided here, so feel free to follow me and connect with me. So getting to the agenda of what we're going to cover today, we will talk about what CPQ package settings are, and also have an explanation of some of the key package settings which are very important for us to understand as we go forward in installing or implementing Salesforce CPQ for a customer. To give a quick background, as you know, Salesforce CPQ is a managed package which is installed in the org. So for example, when you set up your trial org, you will get a pre-installed package, which is typically available for 90 days. Within this Salesforce CPQ package, there are settings which control the properties of feature areas within Salesforce CPQ. And with these settings, you can enable or disable features, you can configure aspects of specific features, and also govern how CPQ package behaves overall. It's important to note also that these settings work across the entire package. So what this also means is when we are trying to understand how to use these settings, we should also understand how the business or the customers who are going to use CPQ actually follow the CPQ business process. So we really need to be familiar with a number of high-level requirements early on to be able to configure to these settings. Now, really to understand this, it is best to go to our demo org and walk through some of those settings, and that's what we're going to do next. So here we are in our CPQ trial org. To go to the package settings, we need to first go to the installed package. And then among the installed packages, you look for your CPQ installed package. And here you will see the configure link, which takes you directly to your package settings for the CPQ application. Now you will see that the CPQ package settings are grouped logically by category. So there are a bunch of settings related to documents, to groups, similarly for line editor, plugins, pricing and calculation, and so on. Now, each of these settings control different aspects of Salesforce CPQ. Now, many of them have very specific use cases, but some of them are really, really important in the sense they govern some of the fundamental aspects of how business would like to run their CPQ processes. So we really need to understand them very well. Of course, there is help documentation for each of the settings and useful help text, which will explain what each of these do. But for the purposes of this session, we will not go through each and every setting. However, we will consider some of the most important ones and what their impact is. Before we get started, I do want to point out that at this point, you may not be extremely familiar with Salesforce CPQ, or there may be areas which you're still learning. So when we talk through some of the settings, you may not be able to relate to what this actual functionality is or how it actually translates to when you're configuring the actual application, or how it translates to from an end user impact perspective. So as you learn the settings this time, but when you go ahead and learn the actual features later, do revisit this video and do come back and look at these settings once more. That'll help sort of close the loop and give you a much better perspective and complete understanding of Salesforce CPQ. With this, we will go through some of the most important settings in Salesforce CPQ tab by tab. We will start with the documents related package settings. One of the key ones here is the attachment target. This setting governs where to make the code documents available based on the target object chosen. So if you choose document only, the code documents are available in the chosen Salesforce documents folder only. Whereas if you choose quote or if you choose opportunity, it additionally becomes available in the notes and attachments related list of that specific object. Another setting to note is the enable multi-language translations. This setting allows reps to generate code documents in one of your org's supported languages. Now, enabling this will add a locale pick list to the generate documents page. Additionally, it is important to remember that you must also have translated values stored for and in the different languages for selection. One more setting here is hide document name. Now, this setting allows to hide the file name on a code document. The purpose of this is that it helps prevent the sales reps from changing the default file name. Next, we move to the groups package settings. Here, there is a feature called solution groups enabled. Now, this feature is useful if business has a standard set of code line groupings, so typically such as hardware or software. Now, solution groups let you group and subtotal products independently of other code lines and code line groups. This setting needs to be enabled to allow admins to create solution groups for sales reps to use in their code line editor. The next set of settings is related to the line editor. Now, there are a number of important and interesting settings specific to the code line editor which are controlled here. These settings we will actually cover in another video which covers the code line editor functionality in a lot of detail. So for the purposes of this session, we will skip this, but definitely when you go through the video pertaining to code line editor, you will learn and understand much more about the settings which are being shown here. Next is the plugin package settings, which let you integrate Salesforce CPQ with optional plugins that expand your CPQ features. Now, in these settings here, we reference the appropriate custom script name related to that plugin. So for example, the document store plugin, for example, lets you integrate Salesforce CPQ with document management providers, while the electronic signature plugin lets you integrate Salesforce CPQ with electronic signature providers. Next, we will go to the settings related to pricing and calculation. Again, here are some very important settings which you need to understand and configure. The unit price scale, by default, it is set to 2. And what this does is the fractional unit prices are rounded off to this many decimal places. So typically 2 is a setting which most business users will use. There is a setting called calculate immediately. Now, this setting enables real-time calculation in the code line editor. What this means is that you do not need to click calculate to see the calculated values in the code line editor after updating fields. Now, this feature does have an impact on the code line editor performance. So unless it is really required, it is better to avoid. And again, do remember, even with this enabled, you still need to save or quick save the code for Salesforce CPQ to update the code line and related records. One more setting is the enable quick calculate. Now, this feature improves code calculation time by disabling 3 key features. One is price rules. The second is code line formula fields that depend on parent relationships. And third, displaying roll-up summary fields in the code line editor. So only if you're not using these features and really do not plan to use them in the near future, this may be a setting you should look into. There is an important setting here called use legacy calculator as you would see that I've already deselected this for my trial org. When you are installing CPQ for the first time, it does come as selected. And when you choose to deselect, you have an additional option to authorize a new calculation service. Now, this new calculation service setting appears only on the first installation of Salesforce CPQ and then disappears after the user selects it. It serves to enable the Salesforce CPQ advanced code calculator. This is again an important setting because Salesforce CPQ no longer offers support to the legacy version of the calculator. So in most cases, you do want to remove this and authorize the new calculation service. Now we will go to the settings which are related to subscriptions and renewals, something very key as part of CPQ functionality. There are a number of settings here which are very important. So the first one is the renewal model, which has two options, contract-based and asset-based. Now for a contract-based renewal model, the admin contracts an opportunity or an order with at least one subscription product, and Salesforce CPQ will create a contract record. And then it creates subscription records for your subscription products and asset records for your products with asset conversion. So contract-based model is typically used when your company is selling many subscription products and wants to keep a detailed record of their start and end dates. In the asset-based renewal model, typically the admins contract an opportunity and order, and only an asset record is created for all your non-subscription products with asset conversion. So this method, the asset-based method, is typically used when the company uses only non-subscription products or sells only percentage of total products to represent subscription products. Another important setting here is enable evergreen subscriptions. Now, CPQ users can create contracts with subscriptions that don't have end dates when this setting is enabled. This open-ended term of service allows customers or providers to cancel or terminate subscriptions at any point. Evergreen subscriptions let you quote, sell, and manage subscription products without an end date. So you should enable the setting to let users select either evergreen or renewable/evergreen as a product subscription type. Now, one thing to note here is that after you select this setting, it can't be disabled. So to prevent users from creating evergreen subscriptions, you have to actually remove the evergreen and the renewal/evergreen pick list values from the subscription type field. One more important setting here is bypass preserve bundle structure. Now, this setting removes the requirement to keep the original bundle structure. So your bundle structure becomes individual quote lines on an amendment quote. Now you have to be very careful with the setting, because when you enable the setting and deselect the preserve bundle structure field on the contract, CPQ can actually show some unexpected price changes or unforeseen product and price rule behavior because it is not maintaining that original structure. Now, two very other important settings here, which we'll actually go through in detail with some examples, are the subscription term unit and the subscription prorate precision. Now, the subscription term unit has two values, month and day. If you select month, you will see that there are a number of options which you can choose for the subscription prorate precision. So the subscription term unit typically defines what is the term unit for a subscription. So if you're selling your subscriptions by month, so you would say it's a 12-month subscription, you will choose this as month and put 12 in the subscription term. And you would use day, and typically that's an uncommon case when you're selling subscription term units by day. So if you have a 20-day subscription, and you will put 20 in the subscription term for that when you're doing the quoting, but whereas the term unit would be day. The prorate precision comes into play when you're having a start date and end date which don't exactly match a particular subscription term unit. So if you have a term unit of month, but you have a start date and end date which spans 1.5 months, this particular pick list helps tell CPQ how to do the prorate calculation. One more thing to note here is that if you choose the subscription term unit as day, in the prorate precision, you only have option as day. All the others get automatically deselected. Now we'll actually go to a table which will explain you in more detail how these two work together to do the calculation. The table that you see here goes through different examples of the subscription prorate precision for a specific subscription term which has been set. It has been picked up from a Trailhead module. It does a very good job of explaining the logic behind each of the different scenarios. So the best is to go through them one by one. So let me first explain what the setup is. So the first column talks through the different proration methods, the settings which you are choosing in a subscription prorate precision. The next one explains what sort of math or the logic which is applied to do the prorate calculation. Third is the actual calculation and the calculated prorate multiplier. Note here that the example here refers to a subscription which has a start date of January 10th, 2020 and an end date of April 15th, 2021. Now that means it started in somewhere in the middle of the month in Jan 10th. It spans more than a year. And remember, this is a leap year, and ends not exactly at the end of a month term, but crosses a few days over. So it sort of helps explain the various scenarios. Also, this is related to a subscription product which has a 12-month default subscription term. So DST here refers to default subscription term. Now let's walk through each example. So if you have this scenario set up with a product with a 12-month default subscription term and the given start and end dates, and your subscription prorate precision is set to month, the way Salesforce CPQ calculates the precision is by taking the months rounded up and dividing by the default subscription term. So which means it looks at the months from January 10th to April 15th. And in April, since there are a few days remaining, it actually takes the full month. So even if you have 1 day extra over into the next month, so if you remember from Jan 10th, 2020, there are 15 months which go to April 9th, 2021, because if it starts on a 10th, it ends on a 9th of the next month. So after April 9th, there are 6 more days in April which have been added for the end date. In the month proration method, it rounds up that month and makes that 15 months into 16 months and then divides by the default subscription term, which is 12 months. So it gives a prorate multiplier of 16 by 12, which is 1.333. Now let's look at the next example, which is monthly plus daily. Now this is to help reduce that ambiguity when you're quoting for a subscription which just crosses a particular few days in a month, and then instead of charging for the whole month, you're giving just sort of a prorated multiplier for that particular few days. So it first calculates the months, how many months are there, how many full months, and then looks at the remaining days and applies this given formula. So in this example, there are 15 months, complete months from Jan to March to April 9th, and then there are 6 days, and then it applies that formula to give a prorate multiplier of 1.2664. Now you will note that this is definitely lower than the previous example, and from a customer viewpoint, if they may sort of feel this makes more sense to them, because instead of paying for the full month of that last period of that term, they're only paying for the 6 days which actually they're going to use. So this is a more precise or more granular tweaking of the prorate calculation. Now there is another method which is used, which is called the calendar monthly plus daily. What this does is actually it looks at the partial days of the months and actually removes them out. So from Jan 10th to end of Jan to Jan 31st, which are 22 days, if you include Jan 10th as well, it takes that out because it's a partial month. And then at the end of the subscription, from April 1st to April 15th, there are 15 days, which is not a complete month. It removes those out. So if you remove the Jan and the April pieces you have from February to March, which are complete months, it gives you 14 months, right? So it applies that applicable formula, and you can see there are 22 days divided by 31 days. So 31 is the number of days in January, plus 14 complete months, plus 15 days in April divided by the 30 days in April. So it looks at those and calculates accordingly for those partial months and gives you a prorate multiplier, which is similar but not exactly matching the monthly plus daily approach. The next one is the daily calculator, the proration method. So this is obviously a very fine level of calculation. It calculates days divided by the number of days necessary to complete the default subscription term from start date. So since this is a 12-month default subscription term, it starts on Jan 10th. The number of days it requires to complete is the number of days in the 1 year, which includes, if you pay attention, it includes Feb 29th of 2020 because there's a leap year in 2020. So it's 366 days. So if the same example was Jan 10th, 2019, for example, it would have been 365. So it does a very precise calculation of the total number of days and comes up with a prorate multiplier of 1.623. There is another option, which is the days with calendar month weighted. And what this does is it takes out the number of years and then does a proration based on the remaining days divided by X, where X is 366 if it includes February 29th. So in this case it does, otherwise it will take 365. So it takes the full year and then adds the remaining partial amount, the 96 days, and divides it by 365. Now here it is dividing by 365 because the second part, which is adding after the full year, that is after Jan 9th 2021, so from Jan 10th 2021 to April 15th 2021, that is not a leap year, so it takes 365. So which actually makes the actual prorate multiplier slightly different from the one which was calculated when it was done at a day level. Also note, you have to enable the advanced calculator to get the calendar monthly plus daily option and the day with calendar month weighted options. It is important to understand this table and the calculations and the logic behind this proration calculation very closely, because these really impact how your CPQ subscription quotes will function, especially when you're quoting for ad hoc dates which don't fall on neatly rounded subscription term end dates. If you choose your subscription prorate precision to be day, there are some important considerations to note, and we will walk through them now. Salesforce CPQ does have some unusual behavior with regard to some of the calculations. Now, the first thing to note is if you have your subscription term unit as a day, then your prorate precision automatically defaults to day. You have no other option to choose from. And this logically makes sense because you cannot have a prorate precision which is less granular than your actual term unit, which would not make sense. Also, if you select a daily prorate precision, you have an additional package setting which becomes available to you called ignore leap year days. And what this does is simply as it says, it helps you ignore the leap year days. So February 29th of the leap year will get ignored. So in the examples which we looked at where you are dividing by 366 versus you're dividing by 365, depending on whether the year was a leap year or not, that gets removed and you're always dividing by 365. The third point is actually very critical to understand, and it can confuse users and sales reps if they're not familiar with this. So whenever you have a daily prorate precision, you can have two subscriptions with the same length, but end up having different prices if your subscription term unit is month. So let me explain with this example. If you have a subscription which starts on March 1st and ends on May 15th, which is a span 76 days, what the system does, it divides that by the number of the days which are there in the first month of the subscription. So how many days there are in March is what it takes as the denominator. So it does 76 days divided by 31 days in March to give you a 2.4516 prorate multiplier. Now, if the same thing happens but starts in April 1st and ends on June 15th, you still have 76 days overall. But since you're starting in April, the prorate multiplier takes that into account and divides 76 days by 30 days, with the 30 days in April to give a slightly higher prorate multiplier. So as you can see, even though the overall length of the subscription is the same, the pricing is different because of the settings. So these considerations are important for us to really understand in depth when we are making the changes and we are configuring Salesforce CPQ. Also, it is important to note that it's best to keep this proration method the same for the life of your org. If you do change it, be aware that the old quotes are not retroactively recalculated. And quotes that are recalculated by reps or by some automated process will use the new proration method. So you could have an org which could theoretically have some quotes which are calculated using the old value you had set and some with new. So again, another aspect which makes you think that you really should understand this very well before you choose these settings. So next we are looking at some of the settings related to quote. An important one here is the primary quote keeps opportunity products. Now, when a sales rep deselects the primary field on the quote keeps the opportunity products it inherited when it was made primary. So that is what this particular setting will allow you to do. Another setting is the default quote validity in days, which by default is set with 30 days. The reason this is important is that sales reps cannot edit quotes that have passed their validity date. So again, something to discuss with business and make sure you understand when you make the setting. Now moving on to the settings related to order. Again, a couple of important ones here. One is allow multiple orders. This allows sales reps to split a quote line into multiple orders. Again, it's important to note that this setting is available only in Salesforce CPQ Plus. One more setting is the default order start date. And you have two options here, which are either you can start the order with the quote start date, or you can default it to the current date or today. Now let us look at some additional settings which are available in the package settings. An important one here is called triggers disabled. So as the name suggests, this disables CPQ triggers temporarily, and it's very useful when you're migrating data or performing any other action where you do not want the CPQ triggers to fire. The quantity scale is a scale of quantity fields in the custom pages and code documents. Another setting called the multiple bundles view. Now this, the configurator has two display options for quotes with multiple bundles. In the wizard option, it displays each bundle separately, and the admin can use the product field option layout to customize how the sales reps moves between the different bundle features. Whereas in classic, all the bundles are displayed together in one page, separated by a section layout. Another important setting here is the enable large configurations. This allows users to include more than 400 quotes in product bundles. Now again, you remember this is a setting which applies across the package. So enabling this will slow down processing for all bundles. So really enable this only if it makes sense for your org. And with that, we come to the end of this session on package settings. Thank you very much for listening. We would also like to thank Apex Hours for allowing us this opportunity to present this session.